Greetings from the dark continent, Conscious Caracal here, and tonight we're going to be shining a light on the goings-on down south, more specifically firearms in South Africa and all the questions surrounding it. I actually asked on Twitter for the audience to submit some questions, and there are some very interesting questions that we will cover here tonight. And to help me answer some of these questions, I'm joined by Gideon Joubert, or you might know him better as Paratus. He is a pilot and also the vice chairman of GOSA, the Gun Owners of South Africa, and one of the leading major voices in regards to firearm ownership and rights in regards to South Africa. So you might have seen him wherever firearms are concerned or the rights of firearm owners are under attack. You'll probably see his face there or some of his comments. So welcome on the show, Gideon.
Ernst and the viewers and everyone, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure being here, and lots of interesting questions that came through from the readers today on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to you answering some of them, because a lot of them are actually questions that I'm curious about myself. So firstly, I think something that a lot of South Africans worry about is the fact that when you talk about getting your firearm license, people say that this is something that takes a lot of time. It's something that you're going to have to be prepared to sacrifice a lot of months or even years of your life towards something that it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that way. But can you maybe give us a little bit of an idea what this process maybe looks like in regards to the steps, so people have a better idea that have no exposure to it, that have no idea?
Okay, 100%. And most of the time when we talk about months, it's actually you waiting for the police to do the administration. And please pardon the washing machine noises in the background. We're busy moving. So to start off, if you have got absolutely nothing, you are Joe Public, you've never touched a gun in your life, the first place where you're going to start is find an accredited training provider, of which there are many, 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 and do your firearm proficiency training, which are actual registered unit standards in the National Qualification Framework. And for basic, we're talking about a legal unit standard pertaining to firearm use and a handgun unit standard, and you all do that in one go. So you get study material. There's a closed book test where you go home with the study material, do the self-study, you do the closed book test, you then go to that accredited training provider, you do the closed book test and the actual practical shooting test, which is a observation checklist where they watch what you do, where you have to prove competence pertaining to safety and handling and accuracy, and actually shoot a target. Then once you've successfully completed that process, you get something called your training certificates, which is your statement of results. You've successfully completed the unit standards. You then apply at the police by filling in a form, submitting some character references and some other ancillary documentation for your competency certificate. So that then gets sent away, a criminal record check is done on you, and essentially it's your upload onto the system as a fit and proper person to be allowed to own a firearm, and you wait for them to issue that. While that is ongoing, and that can take 3 months or more, you can start putting everything else in place in order to become a gun owner. So at the moment you get your competency certificate approved, you can immediately apply for your firearm license. So stuff that you would do in that 3-month space is you would get the required SABS approved safe installed in your house, because you need one of those. You'd go pick a firearm that you want or need, whether it's a Glock or a CZ or a Beretta or whatever on earth it is, and purchase it and get the paperwork from the dealership to fill in. You would get your motivation letter sorted out, because, for example, if you want a gun for self-defense, you need to motivate why you need it, which sounds more complex than it is. In an ideal world, you'd write on a scrap of paper, hello, I live in South Africa and I need a gun to protect me against all the violent criminals that plague us in the 7th most homicidal nation on earth. But unfortunately, you need to be a bit more specific than that. So something you would do there is, I make use of Motivus. You can find them on Facebook. They write your motivation for you for a fee. You can also write it yourself with help of friends. It doesn't matter. It essentially is just an unpacking of the need. Once you've got that out the way, you attach copies of certain documents, such as your competency certificate and ID and so on, and then you submit the license application, and that's usually another 3 months. So generally speaking, from the moment you decide to get a firearm license to the moment you actually get it, you're looking at probably a minimum of a 6-month period. But don't let that put you off. It's definitely worth it.
So when you are talking about this long time that it takes, and I think that's common knowledge when it comes to this type of thing, do you have any advice for people in regards to any possible way that they can make the process take not as long, or how they can use their time effectively while they wait?
So basically, the best way to use your time effectively, because it's unfortunately there's not much you can do to expedite the process. You can essentially get your motivation sorted out, your firearm itself, the purchase sorted out, the safe, but most of it you're going to spend waiting else for the police to do the actual administration. What you can do, though, apart from that, is you can already start training, and I'm talking about defensive training with firearms, defensive training without firearms, all this sort of stuff, because a lot of the training providers actually allow you to already attend training and courses and become proficient without you having your own firearm. There are firearms available for you to use for that. Because a mantra that I keep repeating is mindset leads, training feeds, equipment follows. The gun's important, but everything's going nuts. So your mind is your weapon. That is the single most important thing that you have. The training feeds into that, and the equipment is also necessary, but it is bizarrely enough the least important part of it. So get training, any type of training that is appropriate, that is relevant, that feeds into your defensive mindset, it feeds into your situational awareness, and it feeds into your effectiveness to fight back when you have all the tools appropriate. Even something like proper stop the bleed course that teaches you how to use tourniquets, chest seal stuff, where a major artery or blood vessel is ruptured. That stuff is relevant as much as a car crash scene as it is in defensive shooting or any other situation. So that's a 4-hour course. Start thinking about things like that to add to your toolbox of skills, equipment, all that sort of things.
And that actually leads us into one of the first viewer questions that we got via Twitter, and that was the question is, I'm waiting nearly a year just for SAPS to issue my competency. Any suggestions?
It's a stuff up, and that person's not alone. There's been a huge amount of administrative inefficiency, and that's putting it kindly. I'd prefer to call it administrative incompetence from the police pertaining to issuing these things and long waiting periods. You can get a legal opinion on what your rights are pertaining to administrative justice to expedite it, but most of the time you're just going to be, unfortunately, a hostage to that situation until such time as they've made a decision. But there are presently ongoing ongoing cases. I think GOSA is involved in one, and I know that Martin Hood's involved in one, where people that have been waiting for an inordinate period of time have started some form of, it's not quite a class action, but a multiple participant legal action in order to get joy out of the authorities. So that might be worth checking out. Join the GOSA page and just ask it on there, and you will be guided in the right direction.
And you can find that in the bio of Gideon's Twitter and also on his Facebook page. I'll put a link to GOSA in the description as well, but there is a link to Gideon's YouTube and his Twitter in the description. You can go check it out. I think, let me just 100% check. There's his Twitter, his YouTube channel, and his Facebook page, so you'll be able to find what you need there. Now, there has been a question in the live chat regarding gun ownership in South Africa compared to America, and that actually is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and that is, if you look at, for example, gun ownership in South Africa in terms of legal gun ownership, and you compare it to other countries in the world, where do we fall on the list? Are we a gun-friendly country? Are we a country where guns are actually disproportionately not as much owned as in other countries, or how do we compare with the rest of the world when it comes to legal gun ownership?
We are a relatively gun-friendly nation, but ownership-wise, we're not doing good. So we have about half the ownership per 100 people of guns in private hands as Germany does. America is sitting, the US is sitting at about 120 guns per 100 people. Canada is sitting around about 34. The Czech Republic is I believe, in the 30s as well. Germany is sitting at 18 or 19 guns per 100 people. France has more guns at civilian hands than we do. I think even Australia does. Actually, Australia does. Australia, New Zealand. We actually have quite a pathetic rate of civilian firearm ownership without even having an outright ban. And I believe it's because, firstly, people are under the impression that it's either disproportionately difficult to get a gun, which it isn't. It's just an inefficient process. And you can do it, but you need to. I think it's daunting. I honestly, God, think it's overly daunting for people because they look at this administrative process that's opaque and they go, I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to even begin to get a gun. And as soon as you start talking to them, their eyes almost glaze over and they go, oh gosh, that sounds complex. And it's not as bad. It's a box ticking exercise, but we don't have the same strong gun culture as even certain European countries do, unfortunately. And I hope that we can change that and definitely try to make it more accessible to people.
So last year I wrote an opinion piece for firearms.co.za. It was titled "Taking Responsibility Sets You Free," and it was regarding this whole issue of owning a firearm will actually add to your freedom and contribute to how free your life can be. But maybe before we get into that specific idea, if you were to pretty much make an elevator pitch to someone in regards to how owning a firearm contributes to their freedom, what would you tell them?
Well, my elevator pitch is a bit anarchic in the sense I say the state don't allow the government to have the monopoly on the use of armed force, which is what most gun control legislation allows or leads to, is that the government and criminals are the only players in society that have access to armed force, and civilians who are best placed to use that said force in a judicious manner are then prevented from doing so. You are always the first responder to your personal emergency, including your personal crime scene. Nobody is going to get there before you. No one is going to come to save you. If you want to look at true empowerment, then you need access and understanding of the tools available to you in order to empower yourself to do basic things from fighting fires to fighting criminals. And one of those is a firearm in this case. It's also, to me personally, a very strong symbol of individual liberty, purely because of that. It goes against that traditional authoritarian sort of relationship where the government has the only say in who gets to own guns. As a civilian, the difference between being a citizen and being a subject is whether or not you have access to arms. And that is pretty much my take on it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, South Africa is a country where the workable solutions are deemed by the government as unacceptable, while the acceptable solutions are clearly unworkable. So in regards to you talk now specifically about adding to your freedom, but you did mention the state, and a word that we use often in the solidarity movement is the word state-proof, a word that Philip Bass used in his book. Now, in regards to owning a firearm, I would say that that is the first step towards state-proofing your life. A lot of people ask, but how do you state-proof your life? Well, I think the first step you can take is taking responsibility for your own safety so that you're not at the mercy of the government's responsibility to keep you safe. So instead of putting your life and your assets in the state's hands, you can take the first step towards independence by taking more responsibility for your own safety and belongings. And then you can do this by spending more time doing research on how to acquire your legal firearm license. So I think in regards to state proofing, it starts at home. It starts with you. It starts with your own household, making sure that's safe, making sure that your safety is not completely dependent on the state. What are your thoughts on that sentiment?
That's absolutely accurate, I think, and it's spot on in the sense that, look, I don't want us to get anchored and fixated too much on just the gun, because it helps to zoom out a little bit and see the firearm in context of a larger how shall I put it, the larger context of self-empowerment and state proofing for all. Because owning the gun is great. That's a enormous and significant first step. But there are other things that flow into it and flow out of it. And the one is that defensive proficiency is bigger than the tool you choose. And your mindset pertaining to personal safety and security is also bigger than just the gun. But the firearm is such a fundamentally important tool in exercising those concepts effectively that it's very difficult to remove the one from the other. But again, mindset and training and skills are things that aren't tangible as such. You know, they're not like the physical tool. And I'm hoping that encouraging firearm ownership, we're also encouraging that skills development, that attitude development that goes with it. Because the worst fear for any criminal is to hit a house where the victim is not only armed, but also hell of a proficient in the use of that gun and understanding exactly what they're doing. Under those circumstances, you know, you've got such a strong force multiplier. The gang is essentially walking into a death trap and they don't even know it. And that is my way of saying we need to encourage an individual that's armed and proficient is an individual part, it's a speck of resilience. You put those specks of resilience together and you form an island of resilience in the sea of chaos and criminality. And you form enough islands, eventually get a chain which forms a continent of resilience. And let's call it herd immunity, because that's the great go-to phrase these days in this pandemic world we live in. But herd immunity against crime and violence starts with your inoculation, which is the gun, the training, the attitude.
Yeah, and you just administer some lead bullets, some lead pills.
Exactly. It's a very effective vaccine.
But yeah, I think something in the South African context that also needs to be taken into account when you talk about the state is that, let's take, for example, the quotes and the statements by Bheki Cele, the Minister of Police. He would rather blame alcohol for the crime rate in South Africa rather than making it easier for South Africans to get legal firearm licenses. But it makes sense. I always tell people that you need to use a rule of thumb when you are trying to make sense of what an ANC policy or an ANC rhetoric. You use the rule of thumb of asking, does this policy increase or decrease the state's power? And you'll see with the ANC, the case will always 100% of the time be increasing the state's power, not decreasing the state's power. So to blame alcohol and to make it harder to get a firearm is increasing the state's power. You're pretty much saying, well, the solution is to give us more power and money and we'll sort out the problem. While the common sense answer in a country as crime-ridden as South Africa would be, make it as easy as possible for law-abiding citizens to get their firearms. So I'd like to get your take on why exactly, when you think about it, it's the most common sense answer to our crime conundrum. But from your take, why do you think the government is so dead set, it appears, to really stifle people getting their firearm licenses, and seems to be really set out to make it as hard as possible for people?
I think lockdown really exposed it, sort of the hand they were holding, and it's a sense that we're essentially governed by authoritarian plutocrats. That really love socialism for everybody else, but capitalism for themselves. So it's the worst kind of elitism, and anything that gives you independence or agency or strengthens that obviously goes contrary to the type of game they're trying to play. So guns in civilian hands is bad, and that's almost like a worldwide phenomenon where very few countries are willing to trust citizens with guns, and dishonest governments especially. Why on earth, if you're corrupt and you're thieving and you're oppressive, would you ever be okay with civilians owning guns? Because the day that they become hurtful of you, you've given them a mechanism with which to remove you from power, especially if you've squandered the security forces budgets and you've essentially turned your police force into a bulldog with rubber teeth, and you've turned your defense force into a non-entity through 2 decades worth of cater deployment and neglect and incompetence and corruption and these sorts of things. It's the exact same thing that we see. Liquor licenses are a special purpose vehicle for extracting money. It's the same now with this auto system that they want to run out nationally. So you have systems that serve as a mechanism of prevention, prohibition, and control, and then you have the system that serves as a resource, as a manner of gaining revenue from the public. So yeah, the ANC very much doesn't trust civilians and don't like civilians owning guns because of what they are. And unfortunately, they're not alone. There are a great many governments in supposed developed economies that feel the same way.
And I've gotten a comment here in the chat that it's not the first time I've heard this one, but it's pretty good. Where Bernard says, who's the biggest second-hand gun dealer in South Africa? The South African Police Force or Police Service. Now, this actually raises a very important question. Gideon, maybe you can enlighten us a bit more what the situation there currently is in regards to exactly what Bernard is joking about here.
It is, in summary, it's a complete mess. It is an utter apocalyptic mess. So the SAPS's PCAM system that links evidence to criminal cases, that's been down since June last year. They've now rolled out their own one that's designed by CETA, which is a state IT company, which doesn't work. And God only knows when it will work. The same service provider that locked them out of their PCAM system also locked them out of their own internal firearm permit system, which means about 500,000 SAPS guns, state-owned guns, are not being tracked and controlled as the law demands and haven't been since June last year. The CFR itself runs off antiquated software that I don't even understand how the backup system works there, but there have been issues of people that have had guns licensed to them, that they've renewed the license 2 or 3 times already. With a backup rollback, when they went to renew their licenses, the gun showed that, oh no, it's still in dealer stock where they got it 7 or 8 years ago. So that's a complete mess. And the fact that the registry can't even perform basic functions like even tell you how many licensed gun owners there are in the country. I mean, you'd think the purpose of the registry was if you ask the police a question, listen, how many gun owners are there, that they'd be able to hit enter on a keyboard and tell you that it can't do that. The amnesty has been an unmitigated disaster. Last Thursday, 7 amnesty guns that were surrendered for destruction in this amnesty were recovered in Khayelitsha in criminal hands. I have it on good authority that at least 8 guns were recovered across Cape Town prior to that and other operations. So you're looking at tens and tens of guns just in Cape Town already recovered that were supposed to be destroyed. They have been leaked to gangs already.
These handguns, or are these more high caliber as well?
Handguns. But it's still the case of, when we raised these concerns that we're going to see Colonel Crispin's 2.0, we were told that we're being alarmist. Now it's actually happening, and everyone's dead bloody quiet about it. Which, yeah, Bernard's not wrong. He's actually absolutely spot on in most cases, which is funny and sad. Yeah.
So this is a problem that's not just a once-off thing, like one big loss of guns by SAPS. This is something that's a continuous leak, if I understand it correctly, and it's getting worse.
Yeah. Firearm did some awesome statistics on this a couple of years ago where I can't remember exactly how many thousands of guns the police service lost, in inverted commas, in a 6-year period. But when I collated a whole bunch of the statistics, including the Firearm stats, and compared it with civilian losses as reported in the SAPS annual reports, we came to a fairly conservative conclusion that the average civilian gun owner, once you control for security companies and all this sort of stuff, the police lose at least 8 times as many firearms per capita as civilians do. And our recovery rate is sitting at, for civilian guns, was close to 99% per year, where the SAPS recovery rate sat at about 15% per year of the guns that they lost. So, I mean, the police lose R5 rifles, they lose all sorts of fun things, and those things just aren't recovered. yeah, you have to start asking questions. But how does that work? Because police operations don't just go after, say, oh, okay, we think we might be able to recover some civilian guns. Let's go. It's you get what you get on the scene. So there are issues with this.
Mm. You mentioned renewing your license, and that's actually something that we did get some questions about. What is you've described the getting your license process, but what is the renewal of a license process?
The renewal is a lot less complicated. So essentially 3 months before it expires, the police want you to hand in a license renewal form that essentially states that your circumstances haven't changed. It always helps to attach a updated motivation where you just explain you're still using it for the following purposes. But it's really a non-event. Renewals are easy. The sad part is a lot of people forget, because self-defense licenses you need to renew you need to renew them every 5 years, and sport and hunting licenses every 10. So if you've got multiple guns, it's a good idea to try to develop a mechanism to keep track of your expiry dates. It'll make your life a lot easier.
Russell McLaren in the chat says, I finally got my license. Can't believe it. I actually did it. 18 months process.
Yeah, that's bloody long, but that's kind of where it goes for a lot of people, just due to the inefficiencies and inadequacies of the system.
Yeah, well, Russell, I think you can pour yourself a very stave dop. I think you deserve it. I think you can celebrate. 18-month process is nothing to sneeze at. So actually, you being one of the being one of the vocal voices in South Africa's gun lobby, can you tell us a bit about some of the big fights that you're currently embroiled in? What's going on the forefront of the gun lobby's battles?
So there's a couple of fights, and there's one big campaign that's the public participation side of it has come to an end, but it's just actually starting and kicking off, and that's the License the Person Register the Firearm campaign that ran via Dear South Africa, where we're trying to change the way that licensing works, in the sense that you become the licensed individual, like a driver's license, and your guns are then electronically just registered to your name, like a car. They have this system in the UK, funny enough. So shotgun certificate. Once you've been declared a fit and proper person, you go and buy a shotgun, you go to the local constabulary, they look at, or they process the serial number, they print out the new certificate, and you go home with your shotgun. And it's a quick and easy process because you've already been vetted. We would like to go to a system similar to that, but just have it electronic and more efficient and more instantaneous, preferably, in the sense that licensing doesn't actually prevent criminality. Enforcing existing laws and catching real criminals is what prevents it. So all that we're doing by making this process as complex as it is we allow corrupt cops and criminals to exploit it, as has happened. And that's a major concern. The amount of fake licenses that are in circulation, the amount of corrupt obtained licenses because the system is compromised, is a concern. And if the system wasn't so opaque and was more transparent, that wouldn't be an issue, as well as for the fact that it will work better for gun owners by a long shot, which means everybody wins. So that's the ongoing campaign, and I will keep everyone up to date with that as much as I can. There are currently campaigns that are kicking off and fights kicking off about undue delays of processing licenses, processing cards, printing cards, all this sort of stuff. Those are the major ones ongoing at the moment.
All right, excellent. I'll be keeping an eye on those. And while you're talking, I mean, now we talked about the one side of the one front of the war, and that's the gun lobby. But there's an anti-gun lobby in South Africa as well. Some people might find that bizarre, but they do exist, and I'd like to get a little bit into that, seeing as I think anyone that listens to what we've described here already today will think that it's common sense to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible for people to get their firearm licenses, and that it's not a bad thing. But we have people that want to make South Africa, quote unquote, gun free. So why do you think there are so many South African citizens that seem so eager to assist the government in their agenda against legal private gun ownership?
Well, I honestly God don't think there's that many of them, for the simple reason that when I did a deep dive on Gun Free South Africa, who they are, who funds them, and what they do a couple of years ago, they were a big, their primary funder was the Open Society Foundation, which the Open Society Foundation of South Africa, which is affiliated, obviously a subsidiary of the Open Society Foundation, which is headquartered in New York, which, for those who don't know, is George Soros's big charity, and they fund all sorts of things and all sorts of not-profit organizations and NGOs. And the plug was pulled on their funding, I think, a year or two ago. So now they're getting funding from some other trust fund or some other international body of capital, I think headquartered in Germany. So GFSA, when I did the numbers, were easily about 90 to 95% foreign funded. They generated very, very little of their funding domestically. And of that includes pro bono work done by Ernst & Young and other agencies that did some marketing and editing and videography on their behalf. And they're essentially a collection of a handful of people that have been doing this since the mid-90s, and that have a civilian disarmament agenda since prior to the Firearms Control Act becoming law, and they just never went away. And their message has remained consistent in the sense that guns are dangerous. You can't defend yourself with guns because of made-up statistics, and everyone will be better off if nobody has guns, including the police. So I don't quite understand. They've never adequately explained the mechanism of how you're going to get the guns away from civilian hands and then disarm the police. And
without
then the criminals,
state coercion.
Without heavy, but even how the state would then disarm its own police.
Oh, right.
And then, because that's a key part of the whole thing. And then somehow when this has happened, criminals will not have guns, and gender-based violence will disappear overnight, as well as violent crime, which, as far as causal directions and correlations go, that's some major leaps. And I've read a lot of their literature, and I've never managed to get a handle on it. So I'd like to state for the record my personal opinion, and don't take this for granted. Go do your own reading, but I think they're not coherent. I honestly think that the anti-gun lobby in this country they're not arguing intelligently against why civilians should have guns.
But yeah, I think you are 100% right in regards to the minuscule impact that they've really had in regards to stifling your plans and your initiatives. But maybe in a more relevant sense, can you tell us the story of the gun lobby in South Africa? Has it always been around? Is it something that's only recently started gaining traction? What's the timeline like?
The gun lobby as such, and this is in reference purely to gun-owning organizations and to promote the rights of civilians owning guns, started off, it became a big thing in the 1980s. And it's an interesting thing because a lot of, I think we finally reached a point now, seeing as there are far more black licensed gun owners in South Africa than white ones, that, when the lefties go, it's a white male Afrikaner thing, it's easy to pour water on that now. But even back then, there wasn't a healthy relationship between civilians and the government pertaining to firearm ownership. The government was more than happy for conscripts to have access to guns and for policemen and professional soldiers, as long as those guns were in the hands of elements that were under government control. Even the commando system, if you were a farmer and you were part of the commandos, you could have an R4 rifle, but you need to toe the line and you need to be part of a formalized body. You could not, in your private capacity, own a semi-auto rifle. There were limits and restrictions onto the type of guns that civilians could own. And funnily enough, a lot of those restrictions were lifted with the more oppressive legislation that came in later on. Under under the Firearms Control Act of 2000. But there was already tension between gun owners and government then, where gun owners said, listen, we don't appreciate being discriminated against and limited this way. So the fight started in the 80s. It really became heated in the 90s. And the incredibly strong media machine essentially made it a done deal that the Firearms Control Act of 2000 was going to become law in spite of extreme opposition against it. And that's why Gun Free SA is so relevant, is they still have a lot of friends in the media that give them a massive megaphone to make their voice heard. And that's a relic from the 90s. It was I still remember reading as a kid on the way to school, the gun debate in the Citizen newspaper. It was heavy and it was one-sided and it was going in one direction.
No, it's fascinating, actually. I think for outsiders looking into South Africa, seeing a crime-ridden country so divided in regards to guns. But I would argue that the majority of South Africans really don't have a problem with legal firearm ownership. I think they're quite pro it.
No, definitely. That's exactly the attitude that I've experienced myself when speaking to like ordinary people day to day. Like most people are either pro guns or they're apathetic towards it. They don't care really either way. There are very, very few that are vehemently and viscerally opposed to civilian firearm ownership. So when you look at the pro-gun lobby, so to speak, it's a big voice representing a lot of people, whereas the anti-gun lobby is really, really not a large amount of people that believe in complete civilian disarmament. I mean, for Pete's sake, I remember John Mathan of Radio 702 when in 2019, Bekele came out with a whole drive where he wanted to essentially remove Section 13, self-defense, as a reason to own a gun in South Africa. And there was a huge uproar and pushback against that. And I went onto a 702 and 567 Cape Talk interview with John Matham, and John is very much not pro-gun in a big way. The man is not at all a fan of civilian gun ownership, and he full-blown agreed with me and said, in his opinion, this is a step far too far. Like, you can't, in our country, remove people's ability to own guns for self-defense. To him, it's just abhorrent. It doesn't make sense. And I thought, when that happened, I thought, okay, we've got a lot more reach and a lot more people that agree with us than I think. That was not bad.
It's a fascinating history when you really put it on a timeline. But yeah, we've got a lot of audience questions that we need to get to. One that came in was, so the question goes, my dad's firearm license had expired a long time ago already, and he can't renew it due to poor health and failing eyesight. Is there any way that the license can be transferred?
At the moment, no. And this is the sad part of it. So the shitty way our system works is if a license expires, it evaporates. It ceases to exist. So unless you make use of an amnesty to get that firearm back on your name or someone else's name, it's pretty much sort of out in the void. Your options really are to hand it in for destruction, which is not what you want to hear, or I would approach a competent gun lawyer and ask them for an opinion pertaining, because you've got individual circumstances matter. And if your father failed to renew because of his circumstances pertaining to his health, then you may even have a case. But it also depends, is the gun you're trying to transfer worth it? If it's something that's really special, like a Mauser rifle or something that's worth a lot or has an incredible amount of sentimental value, then I would recommend that course of action. But if it's a Rossi 38 special snub nose that's worth 250 Rand, it might not be worth your time and effort. But like I said, it depends on the individual.
Yeah, so another question that came in, you mentioned earlier that you might, when you want to renew your license, you need to, 3 months before it expires, you need to get on that process. So, and this relates to this question, which is they asked, what do you do when you start the process of renewing your license, but it takes months for it to be completed, and in the meantime your license expires. Can you use that weapon, or are you then an unlicensed firearm owner?
You could certainly use it. I would keep a copy of the renewal receipt on my person just in case. But the license is valid until such time as the new license application, be it a renewal or whatever, is finalized. So what happened to me is they took more than a year to renew my self-defense license. So in essence, for about 9 months, I had an expired license that was in the process of being renewed until it finally got finalized. So I scored 9 months on my license, but it remained valid until the new one was finalized, at which point I received the new license card, and then I just filed the old one in my, because I also, pro tip, keep all your license cards. If you renew, don't throw the old one away, file it somewhere where you can get it, because the CFR and the electronic database at the CFR is the rec. Always keep paper trail of what you own. So don't throw those away.
I see it. Afraid to watch in the chat says, pity his license expires and he has a boating accident and it's at the bottom of the ocean. That's my story, officer. Yeah, boating accidents happen, Gideon. That's part of life. You can't foresee these things. So here's another question that came in. The question is, are there clubs to join with like-minded people concerning firearms?
Plenty. Every city across the country has gun clubs. Somerset West alone has 2 or 3 ranges with clubs attached to them. And the overwhelming majority of firearm clubs and shooting ranges are very newbie friendly. It's a community that really wants new blood. It needs new blood. And fortunately, it's also been getting a lot of new blood. So it's definitely something we encourage. And there's a place in the sun for everybody. And it's a great experience to learn, to develop your skills, to check out your equipment, to see if your gear works, and to have fun as well, because that's also the thing. That's the reason why you want to participate in sport shooting, is to actually enjoy yourself.
So maybe just a quick follow-up question there. What's the fastest and easiest way then to find these types of clubs near you?
So the best way to find it is to essentially, I found, ask on your local community page, or you can join Ghost's Facebook group. It's quite I found it to be a very good resource for people asking questions. There's a couple of other groups you can join as well. There's gunsight.coza, which is an online forum. I haven't been on Gunsight in a very long time. One of the people who's owner of it is Frank Haas, who's good people. Frank is very good. Join Gunsight, ask that question. There are so many South African firearm resources and forums. Try to track me down on Twitter and ask me, and I'll do my best, although I can't promise I'll get you an answer, because I don't know where Pitsonnewater Shooting Club is and who to speak to. But there are ways of finding this stuff out.
Another question that came in, is there a printout to have close by with the law about firearms?
So what I find the best, and I don't have it on me at the moment, is when you do your proficiency training, you get a nice little legal unit standard study material book that actually covers a great amount of legal paragraphs and applicable legislation for you to know, because you get the Firearms Control Act, which you can download in full, and that I have a copy of on my computer, and give that a good read through. But there are other parts of the law that apply to you, pertaining to defensive use of guns and that stuff. And we're talking about the Criminal Procedures Act. We're talking about the Firearms Control Act of 2000. And there are other pieces of law as well. So they're all nicely collated in your study material for your legal unit standard, so that you don't have to go scratch around between different law books to read it. So that's what I would actually recommend as a first stop resource.
All right. And speaking about laws, what is the situation in South Africa regarding the law when it comes to home intruders?
So you may use lethal force in any situation where your life is under threat from an unlawful attack by any other person. And that attack can either be imminent or it can already be in progress. So there are so many examples I can give, but that's what's important to remember is if someone's running down the street with your television set, you can't shoot them in the back to stop them from seeing your TV. You can't protect property per se with lethal force, although there are certain arguments to be had about that if the property is attached to life, in the sense that, but that's a whole nother convoluted legal argument that I'm not qualified to have. But if someone's attacking you or your wife or your kid or anyone else unlawfully, you can do what it takes to stop that attack. And that applies as much to running them over with your car as it means shooting them with a gun.
Yeah, but this is specifically if this person that's being attacked, your wife or your child's life is in danger. This does not pertain to just being assaulted by someone.
Well, that's where it becomes very subjective, and the law understands it as such. So every individual case of private defense is, how shall we say, judged on its own merits. So someone who attacks your wife with their bare hands could very easily choke her to death. So, I mean, it would be unreasonable for you to make a call. Oh, he's just choking her a little bit. I'm sure she'll be fine. I don't think any court or prosecutor is going to find you guilty of murder if you use lethal force in order to fend off something like that. And there have been cases of, we must also understand that the law doesn't differentiate that your attacker must be armed. A person that attacks you with their bare hands can present just as much a deadly threat as someone that is armed with a panga or an AK-47. What's important
that actually answers this question. Before you continue, there was a question here if this applies, for example, with someone with a knife, or does it apply to matching of force? So yeah, please continue. I just wanted to make sure he knows his question is answered.
Yeah, no, we don't have any proportional force in South Africa. Means that once you've shot the guy and he's lying on the floor and he's no longer attacking you, you can't carry on shooting him while he's there not presenting a threat. You once the attack has stopped, you need to stop the.
And you can also not shoot. You also can't shoot an intruder if he locks himself in the bathroom.
Yeah. That's don't do that. Yeah. Also, don't shoot at things you can't see. It's one of the 4 basic rules of firearm handling. Like, that's why you need a good bright torch that you have with you on your bedstand or elsewhere, so you can light things up before you light them up. Identify always what you're shooting at. But just as another point, if someone attacks you with their bare hands and they are about a third of your size and they're weak and anemic and they can barely lift a matchbox, you're going to struggle to convince the judge that you were justified in shooting them. So please bear in mind, context matters with these things. It requires common sense and a bit of interpretation.
All right.
And I'm not a lawyer. If you want a legal opinion, I highly recommend getting a proper legal opinion.
Yeah. Another question that I actually just was curious about is warning shots. Are warning shots a good idea?
I was at one stage extremely against them for the simple reason that you are always responsible for where the bullet stops. And that includes during warning shots. And I've always felt that under duress, how are you going to pick a safe direction under stress and guarantee that the bullet's going to stop where you are shooting? And what tactically advantage-wise would you gain from shooting that warning shot as opposed to, you've already presented the firearm, you've already told the individual to stop what they're doing. At some point, you need to make the decision either to completely disengage or to follow through. And the warning shot didn't figure into that for me. However, there are circumstances where firing a warning shot may very well be justified, but you do need to understand what that context is, and you need to understand that regardless of what happens, you are still going to be responsible for where the bullet ends up. So understand that, bear it in mind. There are no absolutes in private defense. So I would be an absolute imbecile if I said to you, warning shots are always a bad idea. I'd rather rephrase, in my opinion, warning shots are mostly a bad idea, but there may be that 2% of cases where they are absolutely the best idea. So, yeah.
Now, here comes some fun questions, and this is actually from an American listener who asked, I'd like to hear about the prevalence of large bore air rifles in SA and interest in them. Requires only lead and compressed air to function. They're available in 257, 308, 357, 457, or 510 caliber. They can reach velocities of up to 1,100 FPS.
So I had a conversation with Bernard in the comment section this afternoon about exactly this. And our law essentially has no limit on anything up to 0.22 caliber. So as soon as you get higher than that, it attaches an energy rating to it. So if it's an air rifle that's larger than 0.22, you need to, or rather it needs to be, the projectile needs an energy total or cannot exert an energy total higher than 8 joules. I have no idea how to measure that. I do not have the equation in front of me, but I would like to believe that I'd be able to find that somewhere in the internet. But 8 joules, if it's bigger than 22 caliber, it does need to be licensed. Otherwise, it's going to be classified as a firearm according to the law, and you will need to license it. But there are guys with big bore air rifles in SA. It's its own sub-discipline. It's got quite a healthy level of participation in it. And the guys get very enthusiastic about it. So it is here, and it is quite healthy.
The last audience question that came in is actually a grocery list of questions, so I'll take them one by one. So he asked, in terms of gear for your EDC defensive pistol, first point. Oh, I hear the saps out there right now.
Oh yeah, they're coming for me. No, not great.
They've heard you were shit talking them. So the first question is, how many mags to carry? And this is EDC defensive pistol, just for context.
So I carry a minimum of 1 spare magazine, but I generally carry 3. And it's not, a lot of people say, oh, okay, but how big a shootout do you plan to get involved in? I'm going, it's not about the amount of the volume of lead I expect to send at bad people. It's magazine failure happens. Something stupid like a follower or spring failure in the magazine can take the entire magazine out of the fight, which means if that's the only magazine you've got, the gun becomes a paperweight.
Game over.
I've seen stupid things where a policeman in the middle of a gunfight falls, smacks the gun on the tar, magazine base plate cracks open, spring shoots out, and all the ammunition goes with it. And if you only had 1 magazine, that would have been the end of it. So things happen. So spare magazines fulfill multiple purposes. It gives you more capacity. It gives you more options. And it also is your safety net in the event of a magazine failure.
Second bullet point, choice of belt.
I've got a couple. So I like the Kellerman leather EDC belt. It's a leather belt with a Kydex or spring steel insert that makes it nice and stiff. I do believe that the Burble guys that make the Burble wear, they also have an everyday carry belt that I haven't tried out yet, but it looks decent enough on their website. So I'll actually order one, and I can give you some feedback. The Wilderness Instructor belt, it's a canvas mesh belt with a massive buckle that you essentially just pull the belt through. That one is another belt I found very useful. And then, of course, if you have the money for it, excellent belt is the Core, K-O-R-E belts that we also stock at CHS Guns and Ammo. And I think you can find them at most dealerships around SA. They're quite prolific. It looks neat. You can wear it with a suit and tie. You can wear it with shorts. It's a nice blending into the background belt, and it's a great gun belt.
Third bullet point, holster preferences.
Okay, couple. I most of the time carry appendix inside of the waistband. I carry in a CKCS holster made at CHS as well with the sidecar. That's for the Glock 19. The USP is a bit big, so I carry that outside the waistband on my strong side. in a CKCS as well. I'm a big fan of Safariland. They make amazing holsters. If it's in your price range, and Safariland will outlast you. It's a injection mold American holster with active retention system. They're awesome. Apart from that, we've got really good local holster manufacturers. We've got Quantum Carry. We've got Daniel's Holsters. There's a whole bunch of others scattered around the country. So there is, in all likelihood, a custom Kydex holster manufacturer in your city that can sort you out.
Next question, to red dot or not to red dot?
Yes and no. So this is a debate that's about 10 years old, I think, when the red dots first started appearing on defensive carry guns. They give you one focal plane. However, so that's a very big advantage. You don't have to line up a front sight, a rear sight, and a target. You can just put the dot on the target. And once you are proficient at finding the dot as you push out, you're going to be faster on target and faster transitioning. Most defensive shootings, however, happen at ranges where you may not even look for the sight. You're going to be doing instinctive point shooting. So it may or may not, it's not something that you must have. I'm not going to say screw iron sights, get your gun and put a red dot on it. If you can afford the red dot, if you're willing to put in the time and the training to become proficient with it, it's most certainly a very advantageous thing, especially on sport guns, but also on defensive guns, depending upon the options you're looking at. However, on my guns, I just have traditional iron sights and night sights. And I'm still very old school with them, but they work. But at some point, I may very well consider a dot. So depends on the individual, depends on your budget and the amount of work you're willing to put in. But dots definitely have a place.
And then the last question in this guy's laundry list of questions is spare mags in mag holster or pockets?
Mag holster. Simple reason, they're always in the same place. They're not going to jingle around and fall out, and they are easy to get to. If you're going to grope in your pocket for the magazine, that's just... Look, if you have no choice, carry it in your pocket. Lots of respectable people do that, but I like having them. I like having them in a spot where I know where they are, and I can always get to them in the same way.
And pockets get holes.
Pockets get holes, and pockets constrict your hand, and it can. I mean, the amount of times I've struggled getting just my cell phone out my pocket when it's ringing has made me go, I don't like pockets. They're great to store things in, they're not great to get them out of in a hurry.
Okay, right. That's the end of those. So 2 questions left that I think are very important in regards to our topic tonight, and I think this is actually, it's a simple question, but I think it's a hard one, and that's, how do you choose the gun that's right for you? Let's say you've gotten through the process, you've gotten your license, and a part of the process of getting the license is you obviously have to identify the weapon. But how do you choose the best one that suits you?
So one of my Piratus partners wrote a very good article on this that I will share and tag you in. And yeah, Brian Menny wrote it, and he made actually a list of things that only you can choose your defensive handgun, but it needs to subscribe to a couple of there's a few things. The first most important one is needs to be reliable, in the sense of you want it to go bang when you need it to go bang, because when you're in the fight for your life, you don't want it to go click. That is an issue. So pick one that's renowned for reliability as much as you can. Okay. The second one is it needs to be ergonomic to your lifestyle. So there's no point in you buying a full-size service pistol like a Heckler & Koch USP or a Glock 17 or a Beretta 92F, but your daily schedule or your lifestyle doesn't allow you to carry and conceal that gun. Then ultimately it's going to end up in the safe, which means you're not going to train with it, you're not going to carry it, and it's going to be useless to you when you need it most. So rather carry a single stack 9mm with a compact grip than a full-size service pistol if the single stack with the lower ammunition capacity is the gun you're going to carry every single day. Third point you need to look at, is the gun trainable, in the sense of is it something that you're going to want to go to the shooting range with and train? Because the training will build proficiency, which will build confidence, which will feed into your defensive mindset, which will make you better at defending yourself. And lastly, capable caliber. 9mm is prolific. 9mm is a great sort of benchmark standard defensive caliber. You're not really going to be that good at trying to defend yourself with a .22. Yeah, you can still kill someone or stop someone with a .22, but you're not going to be remotely as effective with that caliber as something like a 9mm. Doesn't mean you have to go 45 ACP. Most people these days don't, but 9mm is a good standard, gold standard.
Something you mentioned there is actually, I think, for context for foreign listeners in regards to South Africa's laws when it comes to open carry and concealed carry. What's the situation here?
So by law, you have to carry your firearm in public in a bag or backpack or suitable holster on your person, as long as it's completely covered. Now, concealed means that, no one can see it's a gun, whereas completely covered just means it's completely covered. From a practical standpoint, I recommend concealing, because firstly, you're going to comply with the law, and secondly, the criminals aren't going to know you're armed. So you have that tactical advantage, and it just makes sense. So concealed carry is the way to go in SA.
Yeah, it also makes it harder for someone to target the gun on you when you're not aware, trying to grab it or to pretty much disable it in some way or make it hard for you to unholster it. It makes a lot of sense. Now, Gideon, last question in regards to you being a fighter, a word we like here in South Africa, for gun rights in South Africa. How can people that are listening support you in your cause, and people like you that are fighting for gun rights in South Africa? What's the easiest, best way that people can help?
Well, the easiest, best way is there's so many things going on, and I'm involved in so many initiatives at the moment. But my thing is, join my mailing list on Parata, so that if Facebook eventually cans my page, which they've been threatening to do for over a year, you can at least be on my mailing list. That doesn't cost you any money. Also follow Dear SA, where I'm involved, and we'll be pushing more firearm-related stuff via that platform, for the simple reason that it is for public participation. I'm very confident that the overwhelming majority in the public is favor of meaningful reform in order to get common sense into the system. So I've got no worries about opposing voices. I'm pretty sure that if you're an opposing voice, I can bring 10 supporting voices to that debate. So that's the two places right now. Join GOSA. There's some good information that's on there, and it's a growing community. And if you really want to get involved in gun rights, join a shooting club. Go, just do a fun shoot. Even if you don't own guns yourself, people there will help you. They want new people in. They will show you around on the ropes, and just come give it a try and see if it's for you. If it's not for you, that's fine. But at least give it a shot.
Well, Gideon, thank you very much for your valuable time tonight. It was a very enlightening discussion. The vast majority of these questions were just my own personal curiosities regarding the matter, so I've learned a lot personally. But also, we got to a lot of interesting audience questions as well, and I think they got some very good answers. But thank you very much to anyone that's curious about what Gideon is doing or how you can get in touch with him. There are links to all his social media in the description. I will now, after the stream, put a link to his websites in there as well, so you can go check that out. Go have a look there if you have time, and get involved and try and support these good types of causes. So, and also thank you very much for everyone that's tuned in. I know a lot of you are having load shedding either now or in a moment. My load shedding is starting in an hour. So Cyril, our overlord Cyril, has been generous to allow this conversation to take place. If you're new on this channel, you can always subscribe and like the stream if you like these types of conversations. I will be talking to a lot of more interesting people in the coming weeks. I already have 2 more episodes booked. So keep an eye out there. And then lastly, good luck to whatever your future fights will be, Gideon. You're fighting a good fight, and you've got my support.
Thank you, Ernst, and everyone, and thanks for having me. It's been great. And just to tell Kermit, that'll be another episode if Ernst wants me on to talk about 3D printed guns, which is a big big thing in the US right now. We can have that discussion with a whole bunch of other stuff as a possible follow-up. But that's up to the Caracal here. So spam him.
No, I'll definitely have that conversation in the future, Gideon. You know your stuff, and it's also a topic that I'm interested in. It's marvelous to see that what new types of technology is able to enable us to do. But thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe, and you can make yourself safer. We just told you how. Enjoy the rest of the week that's also ahead. Cheers, guys. Have a good one, and God bless.